What if pessimism wasn't weakness, but wisdom? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that this question cuts through the illusions that dominate human life. To most people, pessimism sounds like surrender, a failure of spirit, or a refusal to hope. But for Schopenhauer, pessimism was not despair, it was honesty. It was a way of looking at life without disguise, of stripping away the comforting illusions that only deepen our suffering. In his view, the pessimist is not the coward, but the one courageous enough to face existence as it truly is. From the very beginning, Schopenhauer rejected the relentless optimism of his age. Philosophers and politicians alike promised progress, insisting that reason, science, and industry would lead humanity into a brighter future. But Schopenhauer saw something different, a world where suffering remained constant, no matter how much wealth or power increased. Technology changed, societies evolved, but the restless will, the blind force of desire driving every being, remained the same. And as long as the will ruled, suffering would follow. Consider how most people approach life. They chase goals believing that each new achievement will finally deliver lasting happiness. They imagine that the next promotion, the next relationship, the next possession will bring fulfillment. But even when those goals are reached, joy proves fleeting. Soon boredom sets in, and new desires take their place. Schopenhauer compared life to a pendulum, swinging endlessly between pain and boredom, with only brief moments of satisfaction in between. To deny this truth in the name of optimism is to build one's life on illusion. To accept it is to live with clarity. This is the heart of Schopenhauer's pessimism, the recognition that life is shaped more by suffering than by joy. Every creature is driven by needs it cannot fully satisfy, every human bound to desires that vanish the moment they are fulfilled. And yet, he argued, this insight is not meant to paralyze us. It is meant to free us. For once we stop expecting life to provide constant happiness, we stop being betrayed by its absence. Pessimism teaches us to lower our expectations to match reality, and in doing so, it makes disappointment less destructive. Think of how much pain comes not from suffering itself, but from the belief that suffering should not exist. People ask, why me? Why now? They imagine happiness is the natural state, and pain an unfair interruption. But Schopenhauer insisted the opposite, pain is the rule, and joy the exception. To see this clearly is to live without false hope. And to live without false hope is to be less broken when hardship arrives. Pessimism, in this sense, is a shield, not against suffering itself, but against the shock of its inevitability. This perspective, though stark, carries profound wisdom. If we know that loss, failure, and struggle are built into existence, then we no longer live in denial. We prepare ourselves for them, and when they arrive, we endure with greater strength. The pessimist does not say, life is meaningless. The pessimist says, life is difficult, and we must see it clearly if we are to live it well, and in this clarity, Schopenhauer believed, lies the beginning of freedom. If pessimism begins with the recognition that life is difficult, its true value lies in what it teaches us once illusions are stripped away. Schopenhauer believed that when we stop expecting life to provide endless joy, we uncover lessons hidden within suffering itself. Pessimism does not merely remove comfort, it replaces false hopes with truths that endure, truths that prepare us for the storms of existence. Consider disappointment. For the optimist, disappointment feels like betrayal. A failed relationship, a lost job, an unexpected illness, each is experienced as an outrage against the natural order, as if life has broken a promise of happiness. But Schopenhauer insisted, life never made such promises. The expectation of continuous joy is a misunderstanding of existence. The pessimist expects struggle, and so disappointment, though painful, cuts less deeply. Pain arrives, but it does not shatter, because it was anticipated. Pessimism functions as armor, dulling the edge of despair by robbing it of surprise. This insight transforms how we move through the world. Instead of being crushed by unmet expectations, we learn to walk with steadier steps. Suffering no longer seems like a personal curse, but the common condition of all beings. And once we understand this, our pain feels less isolating. We are not singled out by fate, we are simply human, living within the limits of what life allows. This recognition, though dark, provides a kind of solidarity. It connects us to others in a shared vulnerability. From this perspective, pessimism is not despair, but discipline. It is a mental training, a way of preparing the heart to endure. Optimism asks us to believe that everything will be well, but this belief collapses at the first blow. Pessimism prepares us to withstand blows before they come. A person who accepts suffering as inevitable is not broken by it, because they have already made room for it in their understanding of life. They do not waste energy asking why existence is unfair. They know unfairness is woven into its fabric. This outlook also reshapes how we see others. Schopenhauer argued that when we recognize suffering as universal, we cease imagining that others are leading lives free from pain while we alone struggle. Beneath polished appearances, behind smiles and successes, others too are restless, wounded, unsatisfied. This awareness softens judgment. Instead of envy, we feel empathy. Instead of contempt, compassion. The pessimist does not assume that arrogance signals strength or that wealth signals peace. They know that suffering hides behind many masks. To understand this is to approach others not as rivals, but as fellow travelers burdened by the same restless will. In this sense, pessimism becomes the seat of compassion. If life is difficult for everyone, then kindness is no longer optional, it is necessary. Schopenhauer believed compassion was the highest moral truth, born of recognizing our shared condition. The pessimist, by seeing suffering clearly, is most able to extend mercy. They know that cruelty only multiplies misery, while empathy lessens it, however slightly. Pessimism does not make the world colder, it teaches us to warm it with compassion, because without compassion, existence would be unbearable. Another lesson pessimism teaches is humility. Optimism tempts us to believe we are masters of fate, that effort guarantees reward, that love ensures happiness, that justice always prevails. But reality contradicts these assurances. Effort can fail, love can wither, virtue can suffer. Pessimism forces us to accept this. And in that acceptance lies humility. We stop demanding perfection from a world incapable of providing it. We stop imagining ourselves invincible. Instead, we learn to cherish fragile joys without expecting them to last forever. We value small mercies, moments of peace, kindness, beauty, precisely because we know how fleeting they are. This humility deepens our resilience. When misfortune strikes, we are not devastated by shock, we have prepared for it. When success fades, we do not collapse, because we never believed it would last forever. Pessimism gives us a steady footing, a way to walk through life with eyes open, without being undone by each rise and fall. It teaches us to live not by clinging to illusions, but by facing reality with sober clarity. Seen this way, pessimism is not a burden dragging us down, but a foundation strong enough to hold us up. It makes us less fragile in the face of loss, more compassionate in the face of others' struggles, more humble in the face of success. Schopenhauer's wisdom lies in showing that by abandoning false hopes, we gain truths that actually help us endure. We lose illusions, but we gain strength. We lose fantasies, but we gain clarity. And in clarity, we find resilience, the kind that does not vanish when the world turns against us. This is the wisdom hidden in pessimism, not despair, but the courage to live honestly in a world that offers no guarantees. If pessimism begins with clarity and grows into compassion, where does it lead us in the end? For Schopenhauer, the ultimate wisdom of pessimism was not despair, but a new kind of freedom. To live without illusions is not to live without meaning. It is to live more honestly, with eyes open, prepared for suffering yet still capable of wonder. Pessimism strips away the false promises of life, but in the space it leaves behind, something deeper can emerge: peace. Schopenhauer argued that most of our misery comes not from suffering itself, but from the constant struggle against it. We fight pain as though it were unnatural, we resist disappointment as though it were unfair, we chase happiness as though it could be held forever. But when we accept that suffering is a fundamental part of existence, the fight eases. We stop demanding from life what it cannot give. And in that surrender, paradoxically, we find strength. Pessimism frees us from false expectations, and in doing so, it frees us from the endless frustration of seeing those expectations collapse. This freedom reveals itself in silence. When we no longer feel compelled to chase every desire, we can pause. We can sit quietly without the restless itch of needing more. Silence, for Schopenhauer, was not emptiness but fullness. In silence, the will loosens its grip, and we discover a different kind of presence, one not built on striving, but on being. This does not erase pain, but it transforms our relationship to it. We stop running. We endure. And in endurance, we discover peace. Art, too, becomes a refuge. In music, in poetry, in beauty, we step outside the cycle of desire and boredom. We are no longer chasing fulfillment, we are simply witnessing. For Schopenhauer, music especially was a glimpse into the essence of existence, a way to transcend the restless will. In those moments, pessimism's clarity becomes a gift, for it allows us to appreciate art not as escape, but as revelation. Beauty matters more when we know it is fleeting. Music moves us more deeply when we know silence will follow. The fragility of joy gives it weight. Compassion deepens as well. To see suffering as universal is to see kindness as essential. When we drop illusions of personal invincibility, we understand how fragile others are too. Their cruelty becomes less threatening when we recognize it as fear. Their arrogance becomes less impressive when we recognize it as insecurity. And their joy, however brief, becomes more precious when we recognize it as fragile. The pessimist does not envy others, they empathize with them. In this empathy, life's coldness softens. Finally, pessimism teaches us to measure life differently. Instead of chasing grand victories or eternal happiness, we learn to value smaller, truer things, the relief of rest after labor, the comfort of companionship, the beauty of a sunset, the stillness of a quiet room. These do not erase suffering, but they coexist with it, and in that coexistence we find something like meaning. Pessimism does not deny that life is painful. It teaches us to notice that even in pain, moments of peace are possible, and that these moments are enough. So where does this leave us? Schopenhauer's pessimism is not a philosophy of despair but of maturity. It asks us to see life as it is, not as we wish it to be. It strips away illusions, not to leave us empty, but to give us a sturdier ground on which to stand. It invites us to live with less expectation, but more compassion, with less illusion, but more clarity, with less clinging, but more freedom. And perhaps this is its greatest gift. By admitting that happiness will always be fleeting, pessimism frees us to stop chasing it. We stop running in circles, and we begin to walk with steadier steps. Life remains difficult, but it becomes bearable. And in that bearability, in that fragile balance of pain and peace, we discover something more enduring than happiness, wisdom.